In this section, we're going to talk about the transport and the metronome, and we're going to start with the transport bar located at the bottom of the Cubase project window. But it's kind of hard to see down here, so what I'm going to do is quickly move it up onto the screen here a little bit. Then I'm going to drop the mix console or the lower zone out of the way so that we can see more of these controls. Now you'll notice that it's divided into three different sections. There are controls on the left side, in the center, and on the right side. And we're not going to go over all of these features because they're not going to be important for you to learn right now. But let's start over here because you'll find most of the record mode settings over here. And what I really want to point out now is this little vertical ellipse. Those little dots indicate that there are more controls to be seen if you click on them. For example, when you click next to the record mode, you can choose between the punch-in and re-record settings and so forth. And if you click it again, there's even more controls that you can change. Clicking it a third time will collapse that back into its standard configuration. And that's true of a lot of things that you're going to find on the transport bar. Don't be too worried about what they do right now. Just be aware of them. Let's talk about the most obvious buttons that you'll see in the transport panel, which are these four buttons. These control things like stopping and starting the playback, and enabling recording, and activating loop or cycle mode, which allows you to play back or record in loops. But actually, you're going to use the keyboard shortcuts or key commands to control transport much more often than you're going to use these controls, and I'll show those to you in a separate video. But let's talk about these two controls. These are the left and right locator positions. The locators are really critical, fundamental components of Cubase, and I'm going to go over those individually in a separate video. But let's talk about what they do right now. If you click the left locator button, it's going to move the playback position to the position of the locator. For example, if we wanted to set a locator at measure 3, then if you look at the timeline, there's a locator at measure 3, and it's the left locator. Then we'd want to put the right locator to the right of the left locator. It's really important. Right now they're reversed. So by using the right locator controls, we could set the right locator to measure 5, and now we can quickly access that point of measure 3 or measure 5. And there are really easy key commands for the left and right locators too, and we'll go over those separately. Let's go further down the list here, and you'll find the punch in and punch out points, and a lock locator for the positions thereof. Punch in and punch out recording allows you to set a region where Cubase will automatically start and stop the recording. And these are the buttons that control where they're placed and where they're active. So if I click on the punch in, then the punch in recording is active, and if I activate the punch out, then punch out will stop the recording at that location. But where are those locations? Well, there's two different ways to see them. One way is to click on that little vertical ellipse, and here's the punch in and punch out locations. But if you look at the top of the timeline, you'll see a location in red for the punch in and punch out locations. And it's important to note that the timeline actually has a top row and a bottom row. The top row is where you'll see the left and right locators. The bottom half is where you'll see the punch in and punch out points. Then there are a few more buttons that we can see in the transport controls. Right now we just see the standard 4, but if you click that little ellipse, then you'll see the go to next marker and go to previous marker buttons. And if you click it again, then you see the fast forward and rewind buttons. But I'll close that for right now just so we can see some of these other controls. Next to that, we have the time display, but you can switch that to a different type of display. So if you wanted to see it in time code or in seconds, you can do that. But if you wanted to see bars and beats and a time display, clicking that little ellipse will give you 2 different time displays, and you can configure each one of those to be a separate display. Next to that, you have the tempo and metronome controls, so you can activate or deactivate the tempo track with this button, and we'll go over that a little bit later. And you can set the tempo and the meter of the song here, or the time signature. Next to that, you have the click or metronome enable and disable, and the edit button will reveal the metronome setup window, which we'll go over later as well. So that's the transport bar, and next we'll talk about the numeric keypad.